her voice being in the background, but it's fine. Welcome, everybody joining. And we're going to start a new series. So raise your hands if you were here in part of the first one. We have like a couple of people. Okay, so you definitely are the ones who have like Sarah. You definitely have something that you're going to be able to add to the share. And I think that also you'll be able to appreciate a little bit more. So what we're going to do now is we're really starting new on Tanya. But the way that we're starting, it's not... Oh, perfect. The way that we're starting, we're very lucky that we were able to do the last 53 chapters. We did it very quickly. We did it in 26 weeks, but it gave us this like Google Earth perspective of what Tanya was and what Tanya is. And we went through the chapters and we went very quickly. Like some weeks we even did like 5 chapters, right? But this learning that we're going to do tonight is it's much more detailed. Like sometimes we're not even going to get through a chapter, but we're going to do it more inside. I see Esty brought her book. She's already open and Erin has her notebook and like we are ready to learn. So let's go. Okay, so Coles is here. I know. I heard causing some show bias and she's ready. Like people are like, what? Thursday night? It's so hard. Thursday night is date night. I know.
I walked down and my husband's like, where are you going?
Right. So it happens to be, I always really wanted to do something Thursday. Like I felt like I wanted to be connected to Shabbos. This learning should be connected to Shabbos. And then also like, once you have this Thursday night, now you know, okay, Faigy, you're like, Faigy, you already pushed me that I have to finish Shabbos like by Thursday night. Now you're telling me I have to be finished by Thursday afternoon. Super Yossi right here, don't worry. Unless you don't want to. So now I'm pushing the limits and I'm telling you be ready by Thursday so that you have this Thursday night and then you can go out with your husband right after. Okay, so thank you Hashem that we got to this place. I'm also currently like very recently like in Avelos. So it's like 2.5 weeks since my father was nifter. And now I'm so grateful because I literally all this learning is like Leila Nishmas, Yisrael Tzvi, Ben Aaron David. And he's totally in the room, like right here. So not in a weird way, in like a good way. And I'm very grateful that he's part of it. I also found out during Shiva that he learned Tanya in Yeshiva, which was like so heartwarming to me because I was like, okay, now I know where I got it from. But also a big shout out to Shea Tao because he's literally my Tanya teacher. I listen to him. Sometimes I hear his voice in my head more than my husband's or my children. So I really gain tremendous amount of knowledge and he's like local here in the 5 towns and it's amazing. Okay, so welcome everybody joining online. Okay, so let's start with the book of Tanya. Okay, so for anybody who's totally new, this is it. Like you get your introduction class. Okay, the Tanya, right? What is the Tanya? How many books are part of Tanya? 5, right? There are 5 books of Tanya, similar to the 5 books of Torah, right? Okay, so we have the 5 books of Tanya. The only one that we actually tackled and we are going to be starting to tackle now is the first one. And what's that sefer called? Not Tanya. It's called Sefer HaBeinonim, right? A Beinoni, a regular person, an in-between person. Now we say Beinoni and you're like, oh my gosh, it means so much more than just a person who is like you put on the scales and he's not a Rasha, he's a Tzaddik, he's a Beinoni. So we're very, very lucky to have all that knowledge. But so now we're going to talk about a Beinoni. So this is a Sefer Beinoni. So it's not even called Tanya. But the author of it is known as the Baal Tanya. So who is the Baal Tanya? And how did we get here? And why did he write this book? And is it like, what kind of book is it? And what are we going to learn from it? So this is like Tanya 101 from somebody who's not Chabad. So it's like very hard for me to like pull all these pieces together. I actually was going to print out like a list for everybody of all the Rebbas and where everybody comes from. But basically, where does this all come from? Who's the Rebbe of all Rebbas when it comes to Chassidus? Baal Shem Tov. There's a Baal Shem Tov song coming out this week on the back of the wagon of the Baal Shem Tov. And that's really exciting because basically if you're in the wagon of the Baal Shem Tov then you're like, I'm good. Because the Baal Shem Tov, he had 60 main students. Okay, he had many, many Talmidim, but of the big ones, he had 60. And then his main student, the Maggid of Mizrich, he had 120 students. So we're talking about double. And each one of these students, it wasn't just like, oh, you know, he's a great person and he's a big rabbi and he's a righteous person. These Hasidim that he were learning with, every single one of them created the dynasties of Hasidus that we have today. So every single Hasid can trace themselves back to one of these 120 students or up to 60 students all the way back up to the Baal Shem Tov. So we're talking about like, you know, like a pyramid. If you look it up on top, we have the Baal Shem Tov up here with all the teachings that he's gathered from the Arizal and from Reb Chaim Vital and from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, all of that. And it comes through the Baal Shem Tov and then through all of these Hasidim. And then we have these 120 Hasidim from the Maggid. Now, of those 120 Hasidim, most of them were in Poland. And there was one who they actually called the Litvak, okay, which I just recently learned, was the Alter Rebbe, because he was in Lithuania, right? A Litvak means not from Poland, right? From Lithuania. And at that point it was White Russia, and that's where the Baal Tanya was living. And he like spoke differently. Culturally, he was a little bit different. But he was literally like on the other side of all the Hasidim, which is interesting, because we say like Litva. It makes sense, right? No, why does it make sense? And it's right.
This is like the most Litvish of Hasidus.
Tell you out. Mode. Litvish of all the Hasidim.
Methodical.
Right. So, like when you close your eyes and you imagine a chassid, like what do you see?
Like
Singing, dancing, swaying.
herring.
What?
Herring.
Herring.
Herring. Chill.
Right. Chill, enjoying, right? Have any of you, like, I mean, a lot of you now at this point go to the aisle. And then when you leave the aisle, like, what do you see on the screen? The Rebbe, what's he doing?
Farbringing.
He's farbringing, but he's teaching, right? It's always a teaching. I'm like, 24 hours, you could just sit there and watch all day the screen. And he's teaching, and everything is a mimer, and he's teaching. What is it about Chabad that's different? And you walk into a Breslov shul and everybody's like hanging from the chandelier. You know, it's like it's a very different, very, very different expression of their Hasidus. So what we know about the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the original Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Baal Tanya, who when he wrote this book, what's interesting is that his school of thought was different than most of the Hasidic way of their approach to learning. And their way of approach of learning was Chagas. Okay, so it's Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Chagas. I know we never hear that. What do we hear? What's the word that we always hear? Chabad, right? We hear Chabad, but we never heard the terminology of Chagas, because Chagas is really all the other of the Hasidim. They follow this way of down here. What's down here? Which spheres are down here? There are emotions, right? Our emotions are over here. Our right arm, our left arm, our heart inside. That approach of Chagas is a much more emotional approach. What does the Baal Tanya, what's his approach? Chabad. And what's that? Chachma Bina Das. You're such knowledgeable girls here, right? I know, it's like crazy, because all we think of is like, Shei's Tab is like, Chabad became associated with like, I'm going on vacation. Is there a Chabad there? Like, that's like the ultimate that we need to know about Chabad. But we think of it as like, oh, it's their hospitality, right? They are so, I don't know, growing up as a kid, like it was like their Chabadathons. You know, like I would watch them and they were like always raising money. And like in our mind, what is Chabad doing? Like is anybody here like of Chabad? Yeah? Okay, fine. So, okay, your husband. So, like growing up, it was like, they're putting on tefillin, right? They're giving out Shabbos candles. And I was always just like, I don't know. I always thought that the outward manifestation of their behavior is just who they are. But really it's an expression of how they start off over here. So let's go to this concept of Chabad. Why is Chabad different than Chagas? What's that Tanya tool that we know? Moshal Dalei. We had a private session before. She also really knows it. Yeah. What? Oh, sorry, I wasn't sure if she was talking to me. So, right? So we have, so Moshal Dalei. What is Moshal Dalei? What's Moshal Dalei?
Oh my God.
I know. Sorry, can I ask on the Zoom if they could mute? I'm so sorry. Oh, unless you were answering a question, I'm not sure. Sorry. Okay.
Live and Zoom?
Yeah. No, nobody knows who you are. Don't worry.
I have a very distinct voice. Everyone knows.
Okay.
Nobody knows my voice.
It's a good thing. I heard from Chayish Room that she's like, oh, I heard you taking classes together. You see,
a bunch of my people
works.
this week are like, oh,
Yes.
before I broke down because you didn't check your oil.
Oh, really?
Yes, that's multiple calls.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so Moshat Ali, someone explain it to me.
Your head rules your heart.
Your head rules your heart. That means that anytime I feel something emotional that wants to get to me, I remind myself, 1 second, Moshat Ali, my brain rules over my heart. What comes first? Intellect comes first, and then it flows into our heart. So we have Chachma Bina Das flows into Chagas. So when you have intellect, then it flows and it stirs and it causes emotion. You might have to meditate on it. You might have to wait a bunch of years for it, right? We learned these ideas that like everything that comes from your intellect is much, much slower than things that come from your emotion. Okay, so let's think about your emotions. When you, Khaled, you can get a shout out. I'm sorry, you were, okay. She's on the Zoom. So let's say like you need a quick fix, right? Let's say you need something like, I don't know, for me it's always like I come home from work and like I need to like immediately do something. I need to either stick my kids in the stroller and go for a walk, right? I feel this need to like bring my emotions somewhere. If I do it in an emotional way, if I attack my emotions and let's say go to my behavior, right over here, and behavior could also mean not using my energy for a walk, using my energy to maybe like get upset or lose it on somebody because I'm like so tight, right? But if I want to release and I want something, if it's emotional, it's usually much faster to get to. No? Think about that. Your emotions come to you before your intellect. Now, the problem with coming to your emotions is that it's not as long-lived. Let's say like you... Okay, I need a mashal shali, so work with me here a second. Like, I'm trying to think. When you are feeding off your energy of emotions, you need to be connected to the hub. You need to be plugged in to that. As opposed to something that comes to your intellect, something that you work on that might take a long time. It might take a long time to learn something, to remember something. You have to write it down. You have to type it out. For me, before I prepare, I have to listen to it 3 times, say it over 2 times, and then I could actually say it. Pretty sure. Sometimes I prepare on the way there, but the intellect could take longer. But once I have that knowledge, then that's it. Then I'm good. Then I use any preparation that I've learned for, dealing with my kids, dealing with my coworkers, dealing with my friends, and teaching in Olami in the city. Because I have that intellect. I don't have to always be plugged in when I think about it for a long time. So like this. When it comes to Chabad, when you deal with your intellect first, when you get there and you work on yourselves and you stir up everything from thinking first, it's much longer lasting. It might take a longer time, and then it properly flows into your emotions in a very healthy way.
Yeah, I think that's like what they always say when you want to work on something. It's not like how to deal with the situation. It's not like, okay, what actions? It's not like a playbook. It's like changing the mindset. And then you won't need like a playbook or like, how do I respond to this person? What am I supposed to say that's nice? It's like, if you change the way that you perceive that situation or the way you're feeling,
then that ultimately
you don't need to know what should I have said, how should I have acted, because
right.
It comes from the mind first.
Right. So the way that the Baal Tanya was doing it was that the way that he was coming and his approach of Hasidus was that everything starts with the intellect. It might take longer, but once it flows into the emotions, he was saying it's a little bit like healthier. Okay. So this was who he was. That acronym of Chabad is not about food. That acronym of Chabad is just actually like a school of like philosophical Hasidic thought. It's not, I mean, it is kosher food out wherever you go. I don't know. Like I was thinking about going to like the Keys and then someone's like, don't worry, there's a Chabad there, right? Like, okay, so.
Also like mitzvos.
Also mitzvos.
Like I think of Chabad, I think of wrapping tefillin.
Right. But, so it's interesting. So really, so that's really just, right. That's really the outward manifestation of this. So let's understand a little bit what this school, what this philosophy is and how come they're so good at like putting tefillin on people and doing mitzvot. So let's try to understand that for 1 second. The way that we think of emotional inspiration coming from here, coming up is much faster. The way that intellect flows from the top to the bottom is much slower. Now, the first person that you were to think of, okay, that was somebody who meditated on a thought, the way that Chabad does. Think about a person who came down to this world, who did not have a roll book, who did not have a manuscript, who did not have the Torah, and was able by discerningly looking at the world and with his own brilliant mind, able to discover that there was a God in this world. Avram. Avram is usually a character that we think of, that it was like jolly and maybe a little chubby and like lahavdil, like I was saying, like Santa Claus. Like, what do we know about his tent? It was open on 4 sides. He had the first Chabad house, right? Like it was open on 4 sides. He was calling people in, even not Jewish people, right? Like the malachim that came in, right? He was always looking for people, but he was larger than life and he was big and he was out there and he was like, I'm saying if I had my door open on 4 sides, like people would be coming, all the time, right? Soup kitchen. That's literally what it was like, right? But originally, the way that Abraham actually came down to this world, what was the world experiencing at the time that he was discovering Hashem? Avodah Zarah, right? The world was very much like quick fixes, emotional. God is too far, right? Like I want to worship the sun because the sun's a drop closer. I'm going to worship people because they're a drop closer, right? The whole concept of idol worship was looking for something a little bit of a quicker fix and not necessarily seeing that there's something big in this world. Avram was the first Albert Einstein. Avram was the first person, like literally like Sir Isaac Newton. He recognized through looking and studying at the world without any calculus books or any physics books, he realized that there's a Hashem in this world. And then only after did he grasp all that, he had a switch, like his name changed. He became Avraham, where he was Avram Goyim. And that's when he started becoming Avram, the jolly fellow who had his tent open on four sides and bringing people in. And that is a manifestation of chesed. But that took time. That took trickling down from up here. Oh, don't worry. I know, I'm always late, so you just assume, don't worry, it's okay. There's probably chairs in the kitchen, yeah. So this idea where Avraham understood this concept of Chabad, he understood first looking around the world, seeing the world, learning from the world, gaining all this knowledge, intellect, and then the outward manifestation is like, okay, come here, let me give you tefillin. He was probably putting tefillin on people before there was even tefillin because there wasn't a Torah yet. But that's the idea of that. It's just an outward manifestation of everything that they've learned. So what we see is a very, very small picture of what they're actually learning. And that's really what this book is about. So let's delve into it. Okay. So when you first... Okay. Any questions so far? No? We're good? How's this introduction? Is it helpful that you had all this knowledge from before?
I think it's, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But also, I think it's like thinking as like the first time.
Right. It really is. It's 2.0. It's season 2. Everyone's like, what is season 2? I'm like, okay. I just want to make a trailer. Like, that's it. Like, I just want to do something fun. Yeah.
But you just said that the difference between Chabad and other Hasidus is that it's not Chesed.
It's right.
Right? And
Right.
now you're talking about Avram Avinu.
So Avram Avinu started in the Chabad, and then when we met him after, like when he got a name change at 75, that's when he became the Our Man. That's where he was able to. He is Chesed. No, Avram Avinu is Chesed.
That's
Right.
That's
Right. Right. But it started over here.
We first have to learn and teach.
Yeah, that's the way that it flows.
Healthy chesed.
It's healthy Chesed.
Now,
Yeah.
can I say that?
Right. Oh my gosh, Rabbi Yossi gave such oh my gosh. Last night was the Leshem Ziyartzeit. I'd lit these candles before when it was still Ziyartzeit, but he, like a not normal, like literally, like, you know, you say like your brains on the floor. I was like, my brains are leaking. He was like talking about Chesed and Gvura. Like all of us, now that we've learned it so much, you definitely have to listen to it. So I'm going to send it to you. Okay. So now let's understand a little bit about the actual Sefer Tanya. So how did it start out? So the way, when he starts out in the beginning, there's a little bit of like a forward that the Baal Tanya writes, and he explains how this book came to be. Okay. It was only published in 1796. I had to memorize that date because, like, I'm like, what? I'm like, that date sounds very familiar, but I was like, so I know I try to like think about what was happening like in America at that time. Like I always think about that when I'm like traveling around here in the 5 towns. I see it says like, you know, Woodmere established 1690. I'm like, one second, what was the Baal Shem Tov at? Because like that was happening on the other side of the world. But like now that we know that everything's happening at once, something's also happening here. Something's cooking here. Like I grew up in Brooklyn. You don't see that anywhere. It doesn't say like Flatbush established like something. You know, like okay, so now let's try to understand a little bit about this book. So when he wrote this book first, he starts off by saying that he gathered pamphlets. It started off as pamphlets. It was like little chapters. It wasn't his own actual, he says it wasn't just mine. It was, what? He gathered everybody's like thoughts and pieces from all previous like teachers that he's had and he's been exposed to, like I said, like the Arizal and all the way back literally to the Zohar, and he brings down all of these things because you'll see that a lot of them are quoted in it, and he starts to compile it. He doesn't call himself the author of Tanya, he calls himself the compiler. It's called the Maleket. Maleket? Like the person who writes it down and organizes it and puts together recipe books. And he says that this book is not just, this book is obviously, it's all the pamphlets that he's included, but he codified it. He put it into a very good order, a very good flow. Next week, Amrit Hashem, by then, we're going to have Tanya maps for everybody because this will really help. And especially since we learned it, like you could put it into context, that he decided which chapter goes where, which parak goes where. He literally organized it in such a way that, like, they say that the Hasidim call it Torah Shebechsav of Hasidus. Torah Shebechsav, right, is 5 books, right? I mean, also Nach. Well, this was part of the share that basically Rabbi Yossi said that by the time, like when Mashiach comes, maybe somebody heard this. By the time when Mashiach comes, there's not going to be any more Nevi'im or Ksuvim. And I'm like, no, it just started Nachyomi, and like now we're learning that in Mashiach it's not going to be. But the only sefer that will remain is Megillas Esther. So it'll be the 5 books of Torah and Megillas Esther. That's like the only 2 things. Oh, I don't think you could because I'm logged in. Not. It's not. I didn't log in as the admin. Yeah, that's okay. So Okay, what was I saying? Oh, so that it's like it's similar to like Torah Shebechsav. So what do we know about Torah Shebechsav? Torah Shebechsav is like one of those things that like we study like our whole life, and we have like Rashi and Malbims and Rambans, right, on every single one. Rashi a lot of times is like, why are there two yuds? Oh, because Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara, right? Like we're literally like medactic every single letter in Torah Shebechsav. We do that. But it's the same thing in Tanya. The Baal Tanya is saying that when every time he prepared to add one more letter into Tanya, like as he was writing it, he thought about the entire Tanya at the same time that he was writing this letter. That every single letter, it literally can be learned as Torah Shebechsav. This is something new. I have some Chabad friends at work, and they're like, what do you mean? I've been learning Tanya since I'm in kindergarten. I'm like, and then you learn it straight through seminary? And she's like, yes, straight through seminary. Like, just like we do Chumash and like Navi, and they're learning it in a way of Torah Shebechsav. It really is like you could delve into every single one. So when he wrote it, he specifically said that this is I was the codifier. I put it in like made it into like a recipe book. That's literally how like Sheistal describes it, like a manual on how to live a healthy, emotional, everything life that we're going to talk about. But he made it as a manual. So he took all those transcripts, all those things that were like, you know, all the notes that he wrote down. They were kind of like floating around these pamphlets, and at a certain point, there was hisnagdus, and people were not happy that he was teaching this, and people got a hold of them, and they changed some of the letters. I guess like they made it look like it was apikorsis. So, and we know this like now from learning Tanya, that whenever something is covered in like some kind of scandal, there's always something very big happening there, right? You have to peel off the klipa and then you see something much bigger. So what was happening was that the Baal Tanya realized that people were changing the words, like, you know, like heretics, like people who were against what he was teaching. He was making it look like it was bad. So he was like, okay, enough. No more of these little, you know, circulars going around.
They also weren't signed.
They weren't signed, right. They weren't signed, and they also didn't have like that intro, right? So they were like counterfeit. What are they called? Like,
so they made counterfeit ones. He didn't sign it because he was nervous about the misnagdim, and also he was nervous about the authorities. Because when he finished, then
right, he ended up in jail. So at some point, yeah. So for literally for teaching this, so he didn't sign them. So then he was like, okay, enough. Now we need to put them into a book. I need to compile that. No more little things going around. Printing press came out, printed it, and now like it's been over 200 years, and it's still being printed and still being learned, and it's pretty crazy. And then it just like landed in our laps, and now we're all learning it here. Like it's unbelievable. Okay, so when he first starts out, he says, okay, he actually calls it Sefer Lekutei Amarim. That's like the way that it's just a bunch of like mimers that he put together, that he says that he did it. Okay, so I don't have my book with me. Should I take it a second? Hold on a second. I want to just go inside and we'll learn like just a little bit in the beginning. I don't even have the time. What time is it? I know, you should bring the book. What? 9:05. Okay, fine. Okay, we'll stop at 9:05. It's like, well, we started a little bit late, so it's okay. But I want to just like read just like from the beginning, literally from the first line out. Did we ever like really read inside last time? No, not really. No.
One time.
Okay, so he calls it, right away he starts off by calling it Sefer HaBeinonim, and then he starts off by saying that there's one, I'm sorry, I'm not even going to read inside, attempt, because there's no Nakudos, so I just got very nervous. You know? I'm like literally going live. I don't know why I'm saying I'm nervous. No, because like I was like, shoot, you know the teacher called and you're like, I have no idea what page we're on. I don't even know where to go. So that's it. Okay. So he starts off by saying, I'll look at my notes. He says, we said these words in the beginning. It says, Ki karav elacha hadavar me'od, b'ficha olvavcha lasoso. So what do those words mean? The words are close to us, right? Hadavar me'od, very close. B'ficha uvav chalas, so it's in your mouth, it's in your lips, it's very, very close to you. Okay, so I feel like last week we were playing this game of like hot and cold. We were trying to figure out something on the base of my We're like warmer. This idea of being close to Hashem and learning from Hashem and learning the Sefer, and becoming the best who you can be in your version of Yiddishkeit. Kikar velecha. It's very, very close. It's very, very attainable. And the way that he talks about that this is attainable, it's Yiddishkeit, is that some people sometimes can get very disheartened. They're like, this is too much for me, this is, And one thing that we learn from Hasidus, and it doesn't matter if you're Litvish Hasidus or actual Hasidus, wherever you are, there's this idea where everything that you are going to be learning is something that you can tap into. It's attainable, it's easy, it's not far from you. So any ordinary person, even a Benoni, can do it. Even a person who struggles on a daily basis can actually still do it. So he says, what's the plan of action? So how are we going to get to it? Like, how do I get so close to that? What am I talking about? So he actually brings it down from a Tana. He brings down a story of how Torah is so unattainable. And he says, Derech Harucha, in a long way, Shehi Katsara. That's short. Okay, so it's, what's that called? Like a... right. What does it mean? It's derech harucha. It's a long way, but shehi kitzar, it's actually short. The scenic route. Oh, that's what you described. So I had a good mashal this afternoon. Okay, so derech harucha shehi kitzar. So he brings out a story of a Tana who met a young boy and asked him, like, I want to get to this certain place. How do I get there? So he's like, do you want the long way or do you want the short way? And he's like, obviously I want the short way. Why would I want the long way? So he takes the short way, and the short way, he was hit with like crazy obstacles, like as soon as he got there, like barbed wire fences and cliffs and ocean. Like it was not possible for him to do it. So he comes back to the young boy and he asks him, like, okay, so give me the long way. And he's like, okay, the long way might take a little bit longer, but it'll get you there. So he Ktara. So where I gave a good mashal. It's like the scenic route. It's like you could take a helicopter and go straight to the top of the mountain. You miss everything. You might get a little nauseous on the way. I'm not going to lie. I definitely get car sick and plane sick and helicopter sick, all that stuff. But you get to the top. But that's very, very short wait, and you're missing out. So what we're saying is that Derech Harucha Shehiktar, we have a very long way to go. We definitely do. But I'm going to get you there, and you're going to be able to make it there. So it's the long, short way. It's the scenic route. And I think as I get older, not that I'm like so old, I start realizing like, whoa, like I can start putting my years in chunks, like my teens and my 20s, almost like the ends of my 30s. And it's like every one of that, like as long as it was such an accomplishment. Like, no, it's like now I'm starting to feel really old. Like Malach was telling me that, like, he heard on this podcast that like when you hit age 40, you start experiencing like real loss. And then I was like, shoots. I said those words. I was like, shoots. And he's like, why are you saying shoots? Like, this is all part of it. It's all part of the long journey. And like me, if anything, I've been doing Tanya for 26 weeks now. Like, I should know that it's something that the loss is something very, very different. The loss is just making space for something even bigger to happen, right? So that long, short way is a very, very important way. So he says it's attainable. It's close to you. It's very, very close. It looks like it's far, but it's really very close. It looks like it's long, but it's really very close. Okay. Okay, so now what we're going to do is, okay, so this concept of Chabad and Chagas we can get, like Chagas is the short, long way, if you think about it. So Chagas is short. It goes very, very quick, right, from down over here. Chabad is the very long way. So that takes a long way, but then when it flows in there, it just feels right. So that's really what Chabad is talking about. Okay. Questions, concerns? My children are all up? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, it's fine. Okay, so that's basically just literally the title page. He says, I compiled it. I'm not an author. I'm just a compiler. I put this together in a method that when you read it, what do we say? Anybody remember all the way back from the beginning of Tana? We said that when you read this book, it's like you're having what? Yechidus with the Rebbe. Okay, what's Yechidus? Anybody know?
A one-on-one?
A one-on-one. Like a one-on-one time with the Rebbe. So this book is Chassidus. So is Yechidus, is being able to have a one-on-one with the Rebbe. So let's try to understand that, okay? Because he's not here, right? Mm-hmm. So like, even though I was saying like I've been talking to my father a lot lately, like he collects these quarters. And Esty saved me, don't worry. And I was like looking on the way to Vaya. And I was like, hi, Da. And I was like, oh my God, I'm this person that talks to quarters. Esty's like, don't worry, mental illness cannot develop at your stage of life now, and you're fine. I was like, okay. He loved those centennial quarters. I don't know what it was, like with the drum on the back. That was like his thing. Okay, so now that was his introduction. Then he talks about this compilers forward, and he talks about how anybody who is reading this book, and this I obviously found like very fascinating. I'm writing this book for Mevakshei Hashem. Like mic drop, like enough, right? I know. That's it. For those in Mavak Hashem and all the other, no, he was saying that I'm writing it for people who are searching, right? Obviously, we have a song, Yismach Leib Mavak Hashem. We're searching where our shul that we currently daven in is called Mavak Hashem, Kahal Mavak Hashem. And I also, I never knew really where the name came from, and I know it means that we're searching for you. Amal wrote a song, Yismach Leib Mavak Hashem, that we're searching for you. So he's saying that I'm writing this book for people who are searching. I'm not writing this book for people who are like, is there a God? I'm not sure. Did Har Sinai actually happen? I'm writing this. When you're coming in, when you're opening up this book to learn, that means that you are searching. So that means anybody tuning in or listening here or even here is already like your neshama, something is stirring you that you want to search a little bit more. You want to know a little bit more. It's not that like, you know, when people go to therapy, like let's say like a mother forces a kid to therapy and you're like, I don't know why I'm here. And then you have to that is all part of the therapy session. It's like, okay, let me explain to you why you're here. Because Mama, when you're here, you're going to learn to, not hate your brothers, right? And it's like, well, I want to hit my brothers. That's not what this book is for. This book is not for somebody who's like, I'm not sure if Hashem is here. I'm not sure. This book is about people who are already tapped in and want to search and want, and that's what it's gravitating. That's what it is. Like, I don't understand. Like, I started going to the aisle 6.5 years ago. I don't know why, but when there's something that gravitates and something that pulls you, that means that you're searching. It's not a weird thing that you're like, I know people randomly text me like, Faigy, is it so weird I want to go to the aisle now? I'm like, no, if you're on your way there, if you thought about it, that's already it. Sometimes I just think about going and I don't make it there, but that means that they're searching and that they're there. So he's writing this book not for people who literally for people who are searching, who are on fire, who want to get closer and want to know more. And then what he actually does is he starts to try to he explains this. No, Shay's Taub gave a very good example that let's say you're working out, right? And it's like, you know how to work out at home and you're doing a very good job, but you're not getting the results that you want. So what do? You hire a trainer, right? Or you sign up to a gym and then you start doing it, right? Or the same thing with a diet. You're like, oh, I'm trying to be healthy, but it's not, I'm not getting it, whatever. Go to Miriam Lovett, right? Miriam Berry. She's our family's nutritionist. I don't know if this is HIPAA, but it's we call her Miriam Berry, and it's we know, you're going to Miriam Berry, right? That's their thing. So but I know what to eat. I know that if I eat 2 egg yolks and if I just eat 3 Malibu toasts and I'll be fine, right? But somehow I still end up going. So it's the same thing with the Sefer. It's I know really what to do. Thank you Hashem, I had a nice upbringing. I know what Shabbos is. I know what kosher is. But I want to drop more. That's what he's tapping into. He's tapping into those people who are like, oh, I need an expert. I need someone to help me, guide me through this process. That's really what it's for. That's really the essence of Mavak Hashem. Somebody who knows that they want more, they might have it, but you're like, I'm searching for something to drop more. Okay. Then he explains that, and here's an interesting idea. He says, seeing, let's say we talk about, he says, Eino domeh shmiya kiriyah. What does that mean? You can compare hearing to seeing, right? Okay, so for now, literally, that's why I have a Zoom and an Instagram Live and Spotify. So for those of you listening on Spotify, you're like, that's great. But for those of you who are like, I need to come in person because Eina Domesh Re'iyah, right? There's that feeling of when you see somebody, when you're connected to that person, then really, really do connect. So he says it in a way of Eina Domesh Re'iyah as a disclaimer for this book. Why? Because let's say I'm searching, right? I really want something more. So I open up this book and I want to do it. But everybody will always have when Fermi Taubenfeld does book reviews after Shabbos, right? She's always, I stopped reading a long time ago because I'm literally just immersed in this, but I always see it. It's the way that she describes it, she's oh, this was an 8 out of 10. But then I could book it up and I'd be this was the worst book I ever read in my entire life. And then there's a book that I love that somebody else doesn't like. And it's all because when you read a book, you take the things that you want from it and it speaks to you. Let's say you're reading a story that just is something that you're literally experiencing. Then you're like, oh gosh, I'm so connected to it, right? Or you just pull out the information that you want. So the Alter Rebbe is saying that he's giving a little bit of a disclaimer saying Eina Domesh Re'iyah, when you're reading this, just know that there were people who were actually learning this from the Baal Tanya himself. And they were much more connected like this. And when you read it, it's going to be subjective. Don't worry. It's fine. I'll explain all these disclaimers, but I'm just saying what he's saying. Okay? Then he explains even further why maybe this book is not for you. He literally, when somebody comes into become a Garrett, you push them away 3 times, like Russ and Naomi, right? Naomi said 3 times go away, and she's like, no, I still want to be with you, right? So you kind of there's 3 disclaimers within this book that he says, just be careful when you're reading it, okay? This is like mamish introduction. Like this is like all nothing that we've ever learned before. So he says that it could be that you take this book and you view it as, let's say, like Shakespeare, lahavdil, right? Like there's an educational book out there that like changes you, right? Like when I was a kid and like we had to read Prince and the Pauper, I'm like, what does this have to do with my life? Whatever. Obviously, I'm like, maybe one day I could be a prince. Like, right? You think about it, but like you're reading Charles Dickens and you're reading these books and you're like, this is a book that's great for people that love it, but somehow they make every single 11th grader read these stories. Like, why? Like, I tell my kids, like, you don't have to read it. Like, I got in trouble once for, I feel like I told this. No, like, I watched the movie of The Prince and the Pauper and I wrote an essay on it, and she's like, that scene was never in the book. And I'm like, that was from the movie. So I got in trouble. But why? They put out this information because they're like, this is educational book. So people could view this almost as like an educational book, and like maybe they don't have the intellectual, some people have intellectual capacity to read it. Trust me, I put this book away a few times after, actually I saw it by your house, Sarah. Yankee had it on his right, and I was like, oh, it's so scary, right? So there's people. So that disclaimer, one of them is that it's subjective because you're reading yourself, and two is that like I might not have the intellectual capacity to be able to do it. That's why I'm learning it with Shaysao, or I'll just view it as something like that. That it's not something that necessarily speaks to me. I see it as an educational book. And then he says even more, like, to make it, like, take it one step further, like, even halacha, by the way, like, is not so, sometimes you're like, okay, what's the most clear-cut book in Yiddishkeit, right? Like, halacha, right? Tells you what to do. But as you learn halacha, you realize, one second, Hillel does this, Shammai does this. I was like, what did Hanukkah look like during the time of Hillel and Shammai? Like, some people, like, everybody's windows, how, like, they would go down, some people go down in order, some people go up in order. So this idea of there are discrepancies within halacha. Imagine a book like this that talks about like emotions, and it talks about awe and love and fear and like all these big esoteric scary topics. Imagine how hard it is for someone to read this and interpret it properly, right? Because like even halacha, there's questions like, like, do I call the halacha hotline for this one, or should I call my other local rabbi for this one, right? There are questions when it even comes to halacha. So imagine this book. So he's putting out these disclaimers just as you're reading this. Have this in mind. Don't worry, I'll clarify it all and we'll clear it up, and you should all learn it, and it's not a problem. But like this, we have to understand something about the author, even though he calls himself the compiler, about the author of this book. Okay, when we refer to a rebbe, what is a rebbe? A leader, a mashpia, someone who's very knowledgeable, someone who might even have Ruach HaKodesh, right? Like you go to rebbes and they read names and like it's so weird, right? And like this one, he looks at this name and he tells you about this about your family. Concept of a rebbe is not just a brilliant person, and not just a charismatic person, and not just a wealthy, intelligent, possibly mystical person. A tzaddik. No one said that. A tzaddik. Right. He's a tzaddik.
Why can't you have a rebbe that's a Benoni?
Oh.
Why not?
Could you? Mary, I need you out here. Mary.
A rebbe, in order to lead the way Hasidic rebbes lead, they have to at least be a tzaddik or rebbe. At least.
In the fridge, cold. I forgot drinks. I'm looking at the table. I'm like putting out like grapes and like, I don't know, macadamians. And I'm like, I forgot drinks. Sorry. Okay. Yes. All right. Did you like text her in the middle? Like, can I go get a drink? Oh my gosh. I still remember, like, I was engaged and I was in my mother-in-law's car and it was so hot. She's always like, I was dying, and I text Ellie, it's so hot in your mother's car. And then like 2 minutes later, he calls my mother-in-law and he's like, turn the heat off. I'm like, shoot. Everybody could take anything from the fridge. Please help yourself. Like next week, you're going to end up on the floor over there on the couch. It's going to be so late. Okay, so he says that, so what's a rebbe? A tzaddik, right? But a rebbe is more than that. A rebbe is what we refer to as a neshama klalius. He is, like we said last week, he's like the headquarters of the Jewish people. Remember we were talking about the HQ, that even though everything is all, your life force is all over your body, but the life force, the contact point is over here, and this place right over here in your brain, where the life energy first comes in, that where your headquarters is the most concentrated life force of all, and then it flows into your body, and then it flows into your eyes and its sight, and then it flows into your hands and it's movement, right? And it really all starts here. The same thing with a Rebbe. A Rebbe is a neshama that's a klalius. It's all, everybody is within inside it. He feels other pain, other like he feels his students and his chassidim. He feels their pain. There's so many stories, like the Matzah Shabbos stories with Rabbi Yassi, if anybody ever wants to listen to, about how like tzaddikim, when you come into a room to a Rebbe and he's looking at you and he wants to daven for you, he has to meditate on the fact of who you are, find who you are inside of them, and then he can heal you. Then he can help you. That's why we write kitlach, we write names. I know Tzipora was waiting for this. Tzipora Barry, we were talking about this. God, the berries are like getting so many shout outs tonight. So that when you write, when he looks into your name, it means that he actually knows you. And it's not like in a scary way, like, oh my gosh, the Rebbe knows my kid. Like sometimes we'll go to Rebbes and they like literally describe my child. They're like, that one needs to eat a little healthier. I'm like, what? How'd you know? Like, right, like it was actually this Rebbe, the Mezrich Rebbe. 6.5 years ago, I walked into the room and he was like, tells my husband, oh, your wife is Chabad. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, no, my family's Munkach. And he's like, your wife has a connection with the Lubavitch Rebbe from the second I walked in. And I was literally just starting to go to the aisle now. Like, oh my gosh, you should know that we're all sitting here learning Tanya. Like, it's the craziest thing. Right. So that like could be creepy and it could be like a fear factor. It could be like, wow, this is so weird. It's heebie-jeebie. But it's not, because a Rebbe is actually, if you think about it, by the way, in terms of achtos, right? Like the ultimate achtos mashal is like, I'm on a boat and I dig a hole and they say, stop digging underneath you because we're all going to float. And it's like, we're all going to sink. We're not going to sink. It's under my chair. It's not under your chair. Yeah, but, you know, so if you understand achtos, then of course you understand what a Rebbe is. It's just one step deeper. It's the Rebbe is the headquarters, is that neshama that feels everything. It feels the big toe, it feels the pinky finger, it feels everything. So when you open up this book, don't be scared of like, oh my gosh, all the disclaimers or whatever, because when you literally open it up, you are in Yechidus with the Rebbe. That's what it is. The Rebbe, if you're connecting to his Sefer is still alive and it's still being around, you're connecting it. He's able to see you. So we say, Ein Adom Shmiel Re'iyah, but he really sees you for who you are. And not in like in a real deep way that we are connected to Rebbes. We are connected to our tzaddikim in that way. Like, why do we look to Rebbes for guidance? Why do we look to them as like, almost like a therapist or help or guidance for anything? Oh my gosh, the amount of messages I sent to Rabbi Yassi, like, after like I got it from Shiva, it was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, hey, what about this? What about this? What about this? And it's like all that guidance, but it's so much more. He knows exactly what needs to be told to me. And that's a very, I don't know what that feeling is. It's a very comforting feeling, right? And that's why we are like, as Hasidim, you're on the back of the wagon of the Baal Shem Tov. And then like, you're okay. Like it really is okay. He's like, I got you. As long as you're coming with me, I got you. This makes sense. I'm able to see you. I understand you. So when we now have this approach of Chabad takes a little bit longer, we're going to have to meditate on it. It's going to be a very long way. It's going to be a long scenic route. I like that. It's going to be a scenic route. It's something that we're going to slowly take on. And maybe you're not going to feel it today. Maybe you're not going to feel a difference tomorrow. But I'm sure that everybody here has like a testimony. If we would like send out a review sheet, like something that you felt, you're like, Tanya got me, like it saved me, right? Or it changed the way that I thought, or it changed the way that I think. There is something about it, and that's really what we're searching for. We're looking for those changes. We're looking for movement, but it's going to be slow, but it's going to happen over time. Okay, so I'll end here. Ask any questions. Thank you all for joining on Zoom. Thank you all for joining live, and we'll be here next week. Okay.
I would say
yes.
An interesting point is
You guys could, on the Zoom, you could stay for questions if you want. Yeah.
why would you
Also, by the way, if anybody needs to go, oh yeah, I should shut this. Don't ever stress. There's no pressure. Like if you need to leave early or if you need to come late or like if it looks like it's super professional, like don't worry. Like if, oh my gosh, just come for the questions. Oh, you were listening on the
I was listening at home, and then my husband was at a share, and then he came home, and I'm like, should I go?
Should we do more? Yeah.
I don't think the husband.
Oh my gosh. So sad. Well, I didn't want to like, what time is it? It's 9:26. No, we're good. Like, we're timing. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry. Okay, now we can eat and chow. Okay. Anybody have questions? talk questions. Anybody just want to schmooze and make lamb chop?
My husband's like laughing. Like, wow.
Like not.
I was like waiting to see. I was like waiting to like do Brad and I think he's like, you're not gonna not watch that. He's like, watching it. It sounds like a movie. Like, he's gonna have me.
Can't believe I'm like so.
Those numbers are like, it's always like, yes. I think that we're here to support. Why don't win?
Literally like, hold on one second. I want to see if I could. Okay. Good night. I'm gonna do this. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I know. I was like so nervous. Hold on a second. I have to.